I'm David Leighton Brown, the Master of McLaughlin College, and welcome to one of the major events of our academic year. Together with the School of Public Policy Administration, we sponsor the celebration of 4 or 5 of the United Nations recognized international days. And today, we celebrate the UN World Day of Social Justice. And because the World Day of Social Justice happens to fall during Black History Month, we celebrate Black History Month at the same time. Before I actually launch things, I want to say just 1 or 2 technical items. First, as students who have attended others of our lunch talks will know, we want to recognize your participation in the intellectual life of our community by giving a certificate of participation to people who attend 6 or more of our lunch talks. And the way we know that you've attended 6 or more of them is if you sign in on the attendance sheet on 6 or more times. And the attendance sheet was not at the door as you came in, but is being brought down as I speak. And we'll circulate it around through the audience as the occasion goes on. So even if you don't know if you will ever come back again, keep your options open by signing in now, please. I'm going to turn the microphone over to James Simeon, the director of the School of Public Policy Administration, who will introduce our panelists. And could I ask the panelists to please come and sit up in our rogues gallery here at the front and hear the nice things that James is about to say to
you. Good afternoon, everyone. We're very fortunate indeed to have such a distinguished panel with us today to recognize the UN World Day of Social Justice as well as Black History Month at York University. The significance of social justice need not be emphasized to anyone in this campus. The United Nations has recognized the necessity for the commitment for social justice that is based on the principles of equity, democracy, participation, transparency, accountability, inclusiveness, and justice. In fact, the United Nations has called upon member states to devote a special day, actually February the 20th, which is past now, of course, to promote the objectives and goals of the World Summit for Social Development and a special session of the General Assembly, the 24th special session, and both of which called for international and national development strategies that would include poverty reduction as well as being part of the broader achievement of the Millennium Development Goals of the United Nations. I think it's very fitting that, as Master David Leighton Brown has pointed out, that the World Day of Social Justice falls on February as part of Black History Month. The panel that we have here today consists of individuals who have distinguished themselves in high public office at the local, provincial, and federal levels of government. Zenéa Akonde was the first Black woman elected to the Legislative Assembly of Ontario and the first Black woman to serve as a cabinet minister in Canada. Dr. Alvin Curling was elected Speaker of the Ontario Legislature without any opposition and became the first Caribbean Canadian Speaker of the Legislature in Ontario history. He was the longest serving Caribbean Canadian MLA, serving for some 21 years in the Ontario Legislature, and longest serving Caribbean Canadian MLA, in fact, at any level of government in Canada. Olivia Chow became the first Asian-born woman elected to the Metro Toronto City Council in 1991. She was re-elected 5 times and served with distinction at City Hall for 14 years. She was also Toronto's first children and youth advocate. All of our distinguished guests are educators, and that's very appropriate here for this forum at York University, and have been recognized as outstanding teachers. Zinaya Conde has served as a teacher and principal with the Toronto District School Board. Dr. Alvin Curling began his career as an educator and served as a director for student services at Seneca College and became the president of the World Literacy of Canada. Olivia Chow, of course, is currently distinguished visiting professor at Ryerson University, where she's teaching community engagement and democratic participation, but she's also worked as a college professor and an ESL teacher as well. Now, I should perhaps also point out that Debbie Douglas is not present today. Unfortunately, she's at home with the flu and sends her regrets. And hopefully we'll have Debbie Douglas with us on some future occasion here at McLaughlin College. And finally, I'd like to stress as well that perhaps most importantly, all of our distinguished guests are noted advocates and activists for social justice and progressive change. Throughout their careers, they have demonstrated their personal and collective struggle for social justice. They've all been advocates who have championed the principles of inclusiveness, the importance of public service, and human rights. And let me give you just one example. Olivia Chow was at the forefront of the successful campaign to achieve a national apology and redress for the discriminatory Chinese head tax. And she was at the forefront of this particular movement for over 20 years. They've all won many awards for their dedicated efforts throughout their careers, and these awards are far too numerous for me to list here today. So it's our very great honor and privilege to welcome them here to McLaughlin College to recognize the World Day of Social Justice and part of our Black History Month activities here at York University. The order of our speakers will be Dr. Alvin Curling will start off, and that'll be followed by Zinaya Conde, and then Olivia Chow will close out. So I'd like to call on Dr. Curling.
Thank you very much for that introduction. And I think at the moment I should talk about social justice when you should realize, call me last. First is kind of challenging, isn't it? But again, you know, I have thought what an honor and a privilege to speak to you today, and mostly to share some of my experience more so, and to identify in a sense of social justice. And what I'm going to do, basically, well, social justice itself is so wide. When we say social justice, it finds itself in many areas. It finds itself in education, in justice, in housing, in employment, in immigration, and a various amount of topics all over, and said, where's that social justice to be? But I want also to use the report in which we have done and of the roots of youth violence, and I will make reference more or less, that's my base, and then make some reference thereafter about how we interact. But I want to say too about my panel, the rest of my panelists here, who I've known for years and respected, and people talk about mentors itself, but they have shared some of their great knowledge and experience and interaction. I have sat in the house with Zanina, and I recall Zanina at one stage, she was putting through a bill of, I think it was employment equity. The great social justice of our party was this minister is putting forward, and I'm in the opposition, and who would they ask to sort of criticize or critique or respond to her bill? Would be I. To say that. And I used a phrase at that time, and I can't remember if Zanina remember, I told her I couldn't find anything to critique her. You know, she's quite articulate, she's well informed, she has done her research and all of this. So as a typical politician itself and the opposition, I told her in the term that they've given her a basket to carry water. And in that phrase, I presume they were taken aback for what does that mean? And it's almost like social justice itself. Here is a quite articulate, well-experienced minister carrying through a very important bill that I supported. But in other words, we always say in Parliament, too little, too late. But this one I said was worse. We need some more money in all of this. So here she had this humongous challenge to bring about talking about pay equity and equal pay for work of equal value. And so I felt that there should have been more money there in itself. So my expression, or my only line I could ever find to critique this well-researched individual and well-respected individual was they've given you a basket to carry water. Social justice is almost like that. Every time we address any issue at all in our society, it is always spoken about, but when the resources to go with it, it's not there. So therefore, it looks good in its description and its narrative and its research, but when we're time to walk the talk, it's not there itself. So therefore, we find it, as I said, in immigration, we find it in housing, we find it in poverty elimination as we talk about it all. And then we're not there. So therefore, social justice will always be something that will be talked about on and on and on. And we hear great expressions about eliminating poverty and equity, which I never quite understand, because we're trying to treat some group of people as equal to another group of people. And we have to talk about individuals. A black individual from Nova Scotia and a black individual from Jamaica are two different individuals totally, in a sense. Not because they're black, but itself that, of course, conditions of environment actually influence that. There's another observation I noticed in our introduction, that if you notice too that everything was said here about the first, you know, whether the first black that did that, or the first Asian that did that, or the first woman that did that, it talks about inequity in our system, and therefore when one arrive, you know, we are the first. And that itself, we all have walked that road to say, what does that mean? I got here because of some of the issues that I support strongly and the things that I believe in our society, my society, and then, my golly, I'm the first. But therefore, a lot of folks were there before I do and all that. And I've always wrestled with that about being the first black and the first black person to, or the ambassador was the first Caribbean individual, was appointed ambassador, the first Speaker of the House, and the first black minister in Queen's Park, and all that. And sometimes, even with all that, sometimes we lose it, because people would describe me itself as the first black to be elected in Parliament, of the provincial Parliament. And I have to constantly reminding people of Brathwaite, Len Brathwaite, who was the first black, if you want to call it the first, who was elected in the House. That says something too, that even if you're the first so-called minority, woman or what have you, to be elected, give it some time and they'll forget. Because no one said, Len who? Brathwaite. And then, as a matter of fact, God rest his dear beloved soul, he's passed on, but he was still alive, sometimes sitting in the same audience with me, and they introduced me as the first black. So the fact is that these are the sort of, in itself, inequity. We have to change our mindset about how we do things itself. Now, each of us, I was given a task just after I came back from Dominican Republic as the ambassador, to look at, of course, again, being as a black, considered as something black issue, the roots of youth violence. And we did a rather strategic thing. And I want you to think about this in a sort of social justice. How can we then research this? Because the Premier itself, McGuinty, I had brought many, when we brought this situation to him about the fact that this is happening, our young people are killing themselves and shooting, and they're being discriminated, and many, many issues. We must do something about it. Typical as a politician, what we would do, we do a study. And while we're studying it, people will be quiet a bit. And, but I know that the issue itself would be, although it's not only blacks, young men and women who are shooting each other at a young age, there are other issues to this. The issues, as we know, as we mentioned, about social justice in itself, that issues of poverty and immigration and all of these other factors of it all. So how do we approach that first? So we, this wonderful individual, which I have a great admiration for, Roy McMurtry. And Roy McMurtry himself, as I define him a bit because it's important, we set up this study and going about doing this research. He's white, he's conservative, he a member of parliament, he was the minister of, he was the attorney general, he was a solicitor general, he went to, he was a chief justice, and also he was an ambassador to England at one stage. Now, that's the white part of it. On the black part of it, now we said, well, the comparative, that Alvin Curling is black. Some people didn't know that, so they have to remind it he's black. He's black. He's a member of parliament. He was a cabinet minister. He's an ambassador. Well, I'm not yet the chief justice to kind of change the laws yet, but in that sense itself is to give that balance, to say that people will first, as soon as one address any sort of injustice in our society, we start talking about racism and it comes into a big argument. So usually as we get across the province to talk to young people, we find out that itself, that question is moot. One doesn't have to talk about that anymore. We get right to the meat of the whole issue itself. So we went about doing the roots of youth violence, and we, this is another aspect of it too. So when we got to do this study, or research, or whatever they want to call it, all what we were going to do were done before. Walter Pittman had done a report on this. Stephen Lewis had done a report on that. And now they ask us to do it all over again as if it is new. So in the report, actually, when we started, it took us a year and a half. And as a matter of fact, the Parliament was very anxious to know that what have we done? What have we, taken us too long to know the issues? So they had to hurry it up itself. So after a year and a half, we had completed a hurried report. And we then, in the social justice, look at all youth across the province. Before the end of the time, what happened, we had to exclude one of the most important sector of our society, the First Nation, the Aboriginal individual, the indigenous people in this country who also had a huge issue with some of the injustice of being treated in our society. So here we go again, a study, but asking us to do that. We have to compromise ourselves because time, we can't be spending too much time with all that. So the report came out. And the report you must have heard about, it looks like this itself. The review on the roots of youth violence. A rather interesting aspect of it too is that how do we look at this? Why, as I said, the question would be, why would be that a young 14-year-old would take a gun up and shoot another 14-year-old? It's rather interested how people react to all that. Some people say they need a good spanking. Some people would say that they should be locked away in jail. Some would say that is, oh, they're a single parent And my golly, we could name hundreds of single-parent family who has brought up some remarkable individual, even better than people who have two parents itself. And then we found out there was poverty in it. We have individuals who didn't even know where they live, actually, the environment and who they are itself. One young man in this area at one time, when we asked him, we said to him that, do you know that there is a Lake Ontario and in the city? He didn't realize that even water had touched the city. He had never even been downtown itself. So he has all included. Why? He's never had the occasion to go downtown. Here is a 15, 16-year-old individual not knowing all of that. Individuals who will tell you stories and you don't have to relive it all. Tell you stories that going to school, in one day, the police would stop him 3 times just to ask him where is he going, why is he going, what's your name, which we call in the NICEC, we're trying to change it in all kind of way. And I raise this because it's so current, carding. And this has been going on for a long time, that they're scared out of their wits about the fact that carding, that police are stopping them, that at one stage, or many, many times, many incidences, that young people were asking their friends to go along with them to school and back home in groups of 2 or 3 or 4, because they were scared of not the criminals, but scared of the police. So we live in a society of where justice would be served, or individuals that we pay to protect our lives and to make sure that we can go about ourselves in a peaceful way, being harassed by those who are supposed to be protecting us. But yet, in other areas, there's no police stopping anyone. If, for instance, you're going along on the Don Valley Parkway and you're driving your car and the police pull you over and said, sir, they even give you politely, tell you good night, ask you if you were coming from a party. Yes. Have you been drinking? No, I wouldn't be drinking. And then he pushed his head in the car, as you know, to make a bit of sniff. And he said, okay, have a good day. 2 incidents. This young man who was stopped is noted in the book at the precinct. This gentleman or young lady who stopped on the Don Valley Parkway drive-in, no note of that. Something happened to the same young man a little after that, maybe some confrontation, and they called the police. Then you'll see in the newspaper, known to the police. So immediately you say, known to the police, this guy must be really a criminal itself. But again, if you look for the record in the person on the Don Valley Parkway, you will not see that. There's no notation at all about that. So when we speak about, you can see how, if we're going to have social justice, so when we speak about some of these issues, how deep-rooted it is that the institution itself that asks to protect you are also a part of the discriminatory and the injustice that they deliver onto us itself. I know one of my colleagues here will, of course, you hear the raising about the taxes of the head tax that was done on the Chinese here too. The injustice, and I don't have to speak on that, but that happens all the time. Now, it's Black History Month, and I want to just make some emphasis on that itself. To come out of some of those things, the fact is that more black people, I should have mentioned, more black young men and women, girls, have been stopped for this carding than any other ethnic group. Or in areas where there are people of lower income have been stopped and arrested by the police itself. Even in slavery and enslavement, when that more or less end, for whatever purpose it wasn't the blacks alone who would advocate for the ending of all of that. It took everyone. It took the whites, it took all other aspects of our society to see that injustice and do something about it. Some of the injustices we see in poverty today and the distribution, people, the right wing hate to hear the distribution of wealth, because now it is over that side, and majority of those who have the wealth are small, and the others who without are saying, "Oh, you want to tell me my hard-earned money or wealth should be distributed in any way we can?" Yes, it should be. Just like how the labor of individuals were distributed and paid for, and being injustice being done to the payment of it all. So if we went to address, black, I make a mention to this quite often, if we went to address or talk about Black History Month, we must understand that it takes us all. It's no use that the blacks itself will decide that we're going to stop this injustice. It will never happen. It has to get all those. Mandela himself was never released because of all the blacks in South Africa and the ANC. It's because many people around the world. I will tell you another story about how injustice, the institutions itself are so deep in all this. When the ban in South Africa the embargo was placed on them about no wines and all that, and no more trade with South Africa and Canada. I remember in Cabinet, when we announced that the Liquor Control Board, owned by the government, was very upset about that. So we said no more South African wine. Even after the law was passed that we shall not sell South African wine, it was being still sold. Members of the Cabinet and members literally had to go, and you check the record, to the Liquor Control Board and take the bottles out and break them to say, stop selling that. That happened. University of Toronto, who had quite a lot of investments and bonds and what have you in South Africa, had threatened to sue the Parliament, the Cabinet, because you're interrupting their money. Ian Scott at the time, who was the Attorney General, said they can, but let them come. Eventually, they backed off. So what I'm talking about, when we can all talk about the injustice and social justice itself, realize how deep it is rooted in how any changes could happen. It's deep. Now, what can we do? I know I have 15 minutes to do all this, which I just about there. What can we do? Sometimes we here would like to say, how can we address some of those issues and change the way things are? Stop writing and do anything about research and final statistics and all that. It's there already. I didn't do any statistics when I walked inside some of the jails, the precinct, and find that a majority of these folks are black and they're young. 54% of our young people inside the jails today are black. 54%. Maybe they comprise about 6% of the, 54% of our young people, yes, but are in jail, and the majority of them are black. So the fact is that how do we address all that kind of an issue itself? The institution is there, the courts are there, and why they end up like that itself, we ask ourselves very much so. Because the system itself, as I said, had started from you stop the young man on the road back and forth, asking him where he's going, give him a prison sentence, or put him to be known to the police. And let me go a little step further. I've been in politics I was in politics for 21 years. And often young people come to me and said, I did something bad when I was 12 and 14. Maybe I punched the kid who was bullying me and I got into trouble. But I've cleaned up myself now. I got straight A's and I'm ready to come to York University and I want to go into law, that's good, and all that kind of stuff. And they said, I have to have a criminal record clearance. And I didn't know that I can't get in unless I have a clearance and all of that. So therefore, you are imprisoned or a life sentence, I call it, because of some incident itself. Yet, the fact is that guys on Wall Street, and I don't want to go down there because they do the stealing here too, Wall Street almost shut an entire country down. A couple of guys on Wall Street shut an entire nation of America down, United States of America. Not one went to jail. And a young man who actually had a little smoke or a drink or a punch of a kid who was messing with him, as he said, or diss him, as a life sentence. This injustice itself must be done. One other thing, and before I sit down, and there, I recall at one stage that, if you all remember, maybe again you're so young, when the amalgamation came about in Toronto. And the fact is that here is it that North York, East York, Scarborough, the great Scarborough, the big city of Scarborough, Etobicoke, that one too, downtown Toronto, all going to be one, going to be under one. Now, let me confess to you too, and Zanina will, I don't want to say before Zanina gets up here, because many times I don't even read the entire bill. It's so thick, so confusing, but you get the meat of it. But in my head, it was saying that the bill was about that thick. And I sat there the day, didn't plan anything at all. Sit there, and now the time for me to come to say yes or no. Now, how can I say yes or no? I haven't read the sucker. So I got down and I ready to vote, and I ran into the house today because I didn't even know they were voting on that. And I asked my friend beside me, what are we voting on? They said the amalgamation. Oh, that? I haven't read it. I couldn't. I started reading it, and my golly, there's no way. So my view was to say, I can't vote. Simple as that, can't vote on this. Not knowing that the institution has set up the rules, you either say yes or you say no. How the hell can I say yes or no, and I don't know what the question is? The question is in that book. So I sat there. And I won't go through the details of it all. And my colleagues and I, as a matter of fact, I decided, I don't know what the consequence is. I sat there, and we sat there for maybe about 30 hours or so. And I won't tell the details. People ask me all kind of stuff and that, but we don't details. But what I'm saying to you, can we change something? Yes, we can. So while it is going on, I'm thinking now, so what is your purpose? What do you want out of this, Alvin? And they were asking across people like, the colleagues of Federal, was Federal, which was appalling to me, and I don't want to be too partisan. John Beard was on the other side, was shouting and doing his accusations and all that with me, wasting taxpayers' money daily. I'm sitting there. It's called by the hour. Eventually we sat there and said, so what do you want? I said, it's too thick. I want it to be split up and so I can read it properly. They said, no way. Eventually, they did that. Now, that doesn't take any great, study and all that, when they ask, what does you want? Just want some time to read a thing. By doing that, and I said, they also, too, my constituency out there and the people out there who we are governing, want some time to read the bill. So they split it up. I didn't do it alone. I started off this kind of direction. My colleagues not from all sides, one side didn't even come across, but for the NDP and the Liberals gather around me, and Frances Lankin, you may all know. Well, usually, Frances in the house, you don't mess with Frances. So she came and sat beside me. It sent a clear message that if you're going to take him, you take me. And they all did that. That triggered off some social change to get some social justice itself. So I'm going to leave it there. That I exclude my 15 minutes by now, I'm sure. But that in itself, that you all can do, is look at how social justice, in whatever area you address yourself, whether if it's in poverty, whether it's in immigration and the injustice and the situation there, whatever it is, you take a position itself and then move forward. Actually, the rest follow, and it comes to a flow. Now, it's good to be here. Thank you very much for this participation. I look forward to some of your questions later on. Thank you very much.
Well, thank you very much. You know, Alvin's so clever. He's so clever. It's very hard to attack a man who starts out by agreeing with you, right? And he does that very well. I do remember when we were passing employment equity, and he did tell me that he had a basket to carry water. Any excuse in hard times. Well, I'm here today to talk about karting, but I have to tell you the truth that karting, though but not by that name, has been around a long, long time. It has had several different names. It has had several different descriptions. It's even provoked a lot of different excuses for the behavior, but it's the same old thing, you know. I mean, you bring people along the way, or they break out from slavery after you have told them and all else who'll listen that these are basic, uneducated, stupid, close to animal type people. And once you get that message in there, and you make sure that they're educated, and at least initially only enough to do the basic jobs that you want them to do, once you get that message there, it's hard to break. I was raised a Roman Catholic, and they used to say, they had a saying that if you give us a child until he's 7, he'll stay with us. And I used to think, oh, you know. But they're right about one thing, many things. If you give that much attention to people to continue to perpetuate an image of those people, it becomes increasingly difficult to change it. And even those who have experiences with those people will still feel that way. You know, I went to St. Francis of Assisi School here in Toronto. And I was the only black child in the school. It's quite a distinguishing thing, because I still meet with the people, those who are still alive, that I went to elementary school with. You know, when there's one of you, you have this special status. You're considered exotic or different. When there are more than one of you, they have other names, and they use them. But when I was there, I remember being very close to many of those children. We lived in little areas. We lived in an area that was called Little Italy. That was after I moved out of Kensington, so I went from one immigrant status to another. And people knew me well, and in fact, I'm many of the children's Sia. And I was surprised that when we had our last reunion, and we were talking about different things, there were people talking about those blacks, almost unaware of the fact that I was in the room. Because that defies what they say about experience and education. That's why I say we waste a lot of time when we're dealing with this, if we think that educating people about other people is the only source that's going to change their mind. Because educating people about other people changes their mind about those people that they meet. It doesn't change their general point of view. So carding has had many, many names. We used to just call it racism. We used to just say that they're, oh, here they come again. It's been called drunk, or I'm sorry, it's called, it's not drunk, driving while black. Because, you know, people would, you'd see the police and you'd think, oh my God, here we go again. And after my husband died and I decided I didn't need hair anymore, I cut mine off. So coming back from the farm, without earrings, I guess, and a baseball cap, and I look particularly gungy. I guess I look like a man, and I cannot tell you how many times I have been stopped between here and Creemore in the evening. People pull up, and I say, yes, officer, and they look at me, and I pull off the baseball cap, and they see all this gray hair, and I hope I still identify as a woman. I don't know. I don't know. They sort of think, and they say, oh, it's all right, ma'am. They don't ask to see my driver's license or anything. I say, no, is there something wrong, officer? No. So I guess I'm not who they were looking for. But it allows me to put myself in the position of a young man with hair like this, or even an older man with hair this color, and my complexion, and realize that they have more or less generalized that an old woman isn't likely to be doing anything wrong. But don't they know that when they already stop all those young men? Don't they realize that most of them have done nothing? Surely to goodness they know that the excuse they give as it being a way of communicating with the community is ill-advised. If that's communication, then I've been teaching the wrong thing to all my students all these years. What that is harassment. What that is an opportunity for me to get another name, another identification, another person on a list so that when something happens in this area, we'll have some more people to harass. We'll have some more people to call on to be interviewed. We'll have some more people to question and see whether, in fact, they have been involved. And it's not done kindly. You know, people say, because of the new legislation, which I'll get to, or the new policy changes, that you don't have to. The police, if they give you a card, you must tell them that you don't have to give them any information. You don't wish to answer their questions. And there are men who have tried it and have been beaten badly because of it. So it's the whole process of doing this in order to gather information and to gather statistics is in fact done in a very bad way, in a very coarse way. For blacks, it's rooted in racism. It's age-old, and it's thoroughly taught, and it's well learned. Long before carding, you know, there were groups that objected to the police aggravation. It wasn't always done in cars many years ago, and I'm old enough to know what happened many years ago. Many of us didn't have cars. We got stopped on Dundas and Spadina, walking home from the show, which was on Dundas and Spadina. They got stopped in the middle of Bathurst Street, because there was a large contingency of blacks on Bathurst Street, large community that lived off Bathurst Street. They got stopped coming out of Central Technical School because Central Technical School was one of those schools that had many, many black students years ago. Even before we had the housing areas and the districts that they label now, people were stopped. Now, we weren't the only ones. Let me be truthful, we were not the only ones. There have been passing groups through this harassment. I remember when I'd come home with my friends along College Street from the show on Friday night, the boys, who were almost all Italian, and the girls, the boys would be called over to the police cars and asked what they were doing. And Johnny Janetta said the same thing I was doing last week. I'm coming home from the show, you know. We're coming home from the show. But the whole idea was, at that time, is that those people were questioned because there was some assumption that many of them were part of the mafia, or their families were. And so they were harassed. And eventually, they were allowed to move on. And then there was the Jews. But always there were the blacks, and there still are. Now, carding has brought a great deal of resentment and reaction. And it's not only in the police or with the police that carding is referred to. You know, I've worked for years in schools, and there are teachers I have particularly referred, thank God there are few, I hope there are few, although I was reading last night in the Star, and there may not be as few as I wish, but there were teachers who would say to high school students, we're going to make sure that you get yours one of these days. And talk to them as though they were already a part of the police group. These are students, you know, who took an extra day off school, it's called truancy, or came late, it's called tardy, but never should they be referred to in that way. And there was that comfort about it. You're going to be the next. So it's not just the police. It's people looking at people in this way. What happens with the carding now, and we've been fighting it as groups rather than individually for years now, what happens with what has now been called carding is that we have said that it is against our rights and freedoms. We have turned to the Ontario Human Rights Commission. We have pushed to have this dealt with in the courts. And it's only in 2003 when Julian Faulkner with Roberts took this to the Supreme Court that they were able to allow lawyers to refer to racial profiling within the court case as a realistic happening that influenced why a certain person was stopped and questioned and reported against. So that if it took till 2003 before racial profiling was allowed to be used in the courts, what happened before that? Well, before that, when lawyers would refer to this mode of racism, judges would say, you can't use that. Your client must have been stopped for another reason, or it was happenstance, or we were told about it, but they could not use racial profiling, and yet the police, as well as the individuals and the community, knew it existed. You know, there's an old saying that black mothers never go to sleep until their sons are home. Because you feel that anything could happen. My son is almost 50 and driving down from Sportsnet, he gets stopped most frequently in his car. He's a lawyer. And he gets out of the car, all 6'6" of him, and says, "Yes, officer, what is it tonight?" He has been stopped 37 times. 37 times. And there are other reasons and other uses for stopping black young men. Sometimes it's done to embarrass them. I am convinced that the black students that they stop outside Upper Canada College when they're with their classmates is done to embarrass them and to encourage the other parents to say, "Don't bother with him because you'll be harassed." It is a direct attempt to make them feel smaller than they are. I believe that. And I have spoken to the police about that. Those children, too, are stopped. Not that they shouldn't be, or that the children in the poorer communities should be stopped, but it is used in many different ways to make you feel lesser than. So this carding that's based in racism was supposed to have been over. I was one of those people who supported, God forgive me, Olivia, our last candidate for mayor. And he was elected on the basis that he said he would end carding. And yet when he got there, he brought in the Old Boys Club and turned his decision around, and here we are again, fighting the same issue that's put forward by the same people. Now, they have talked about a modification in the policy. Let me tell you what that is. The modification is that when a person is stopped, they have a right to have an account of the stop, and that they have that information with them. And also, even before that, that they may say to the policeman, "I do not wish to answer your questions." Well, I've told you how harrowing that could be. And so many of them are afraid to do that. My son has told his son, who is 12 and tall, just tell them that your father says that you shouldn't answer the questions, and give them my telephone number. Well, we thought no one will ever stop Miles. He looks so saintly to his grandmother. And Miles was stopped last month, and he stuttered through it. One of his friends was with him, and Miles said, my father said that I shouldn't answer your questions, but here's his card and you can call him. And the fellow looked at him and he said, "You'll answer my questions or you'll go to the station." And so Miles said, can I phone my father? And he got, the policeman said, "Well, what do you want to phone him for? And where is he? And I'll drive you to him." And Miles says, "He doesn't live around here." This whole issue, if the policy is what it's supposed to be, then let it work. Do not have me pay in my taxes for a police service that operates in opposition to my children. Do not ask me to contribute to their attitude, which is negative to my child. So carding is not about to change, except in policy. And we want it wiped out altogether. A little change here and a little change there is not going to do it. According to my rights, according to the rights and freedoms, I have the right to be treated fairly as everyone else. The Ontario Human Rights Commission has now launched a new case about that, and I'm very interested, as I'm sure you are, in seeing how that ends. Now, I think we're going to tag team it, aren't we? And Olivia, you're going to do the rest on Cardi? Thanks. Have I done my 15 minutes? Not like you, Alvin.
I'm much shorter than Sunayana, so I'm going to take the mic down. In fact, I don't need a podium. Good afternoon, everyone. Oh, come on. You can do better than that. Okay, it's wet and damp outside doesn't mean it has to be damp, that your spirit has to be damp. When we're talking about justice, you're supposed to be angry. Come on. Good afternoon. Good afternoon. Okay, better. That's much better. Those of you that are in the back, come on up. I don't bite, do I? You like to hide back? Come on, so I can at least see you, you know? Always think about, no? Okay, you're going to hang there? Okay. I'll look far from you, okay? I'll pick on you. Sunayana and my wonderful friend that I actually visited while you were filibustering. Right? Jack and I think it was like 12 midnight, 1 o'clock. That was your third night or the fifth night or the eighth night. This man has commitment. This thing about fighting just for social justice, you have to have the passion and you have to have the commitment. And I saw that commitment, that when he was in the house, he was not going to move day after day, day after day. We know what is not just. We know that is not just when Sunayana's grandson, 14 was he? 12? 12 were stopped. It's not just that you're harassed over and over and over again, especially when you're young. Ego is a bit fragile. You're made to feel like a criminal. It hurts. It doesn't just hurt physically, it hurts psychologically and spiritually. And yes, it was called driving while black, racial profiling, lots of names. We know what is not just. If you think about the word justice and think about why it's not fair, there's something that clicks in. There is a power imbalance. So ultimately, when you're talking about justice and fairness, when things are not fair, it means that someone has a lot of power. In the case of the police officer, he was big. He had guns, I suppose. Oh, yeah. Tasers. He had his car. He has his walkie-talkie. He's big. He has power. Whereas the 12-year-old, what's your grandson's name? Miles, yeah. Miles, as in the beautiful blue, Miles Davis, or, yeah. Miles, is that right? Okay, Miles did not have that kind of power. So when we are tackling social justice or justice of any kind, you need to ultimately find where is the power and how could I seize it. And don't let anybody kid you. Power cannot be given. Someone cannot give you the power. You have to get it. Which is why when we're talking about justice, it's not just intellectual knowledge, it's not someone else organizing. Ultimately, it's you taking the action, bringing people together, identifying what is not just for you and your friends, taking that action together, and then making the change. So it's not just about the issue. It's not just about poverty. It's not just about kids going to bed hungry. It's not just about earning less money. It's not just about living in houses that are falling apart. It's not just witnessing 15-year-old killing each other. It's about, at the end of the day, who you are bringing together if you want to make a change. I assume that the fact that you're here this afternoon in the middle of a rain and snowstorm, that you are committed to making a difference. You're committed to social justice. You're committed to saying, enough is enough. I'm going to do something. I'm going to bring people together and make a difference. I'm going to do what I can on the issues that matter to me most. And I hope it might be, and hopefully it is, about carding, about racial profiling. It's about driving while black. It's about walking while black or brown. So if that is the issue, or whatever it might be, start with who you are, talking to your friend, find out what is not just. And the next thing is to tell the story about why it is not just. We all can immediately connect with Miles, the 12-year-old. We can immediately identify when Desmond Cole told his story in the front page of Toronto Life and in anywhere else, how many times, how humiliating, how degrading it was when he was stopped and carded. That's why the power of storytelling is very important. It's not just intellectual knowledge, as Alvin said. Alvin said, all the statistics. We know the statistics. We know all that. That's important, but we know what is the percentage. We know the impact. We know who are in jails. We also need to move our hearts. We need to find the capacity, the emotional capacity to act. How do we get to that emotional capacity? It is by telling stories. It is by Sanena telling the story about Miles. It's about you telling your stories or encouraging your friends to tell the story about discrimination, about injustice, about why it must change, and how we can come together to make the change. So today I want to talk very briefly about how we could organize for change. Alvin and Sanena talked about the content. I want to talk about how. Let us tell each other stories about the unfairness and the injustice. Let us then connect with each other. Find the people that are experiencing the same thing, that are feeling that anger that you are feeling, and say, hey, let us come together and do something about it. Form a team. Connect with each other. There are already teams. Black Lives Matter. They have a coalition. There, you can form your own. You can bring your friends together and join those that are existing. There are many really good groups out there. Urban Alliance on Race Relations. Many, many, many others that our first ever, or that our pioneers have established for us. Let us connect with them, form the team. And then we need to strategize. When we're talking about running a campaign, let's talk about carding. The Toronto Star did a series of articles. It was important. It was being talked about. And then when Desmond did his story in the Toronto Life, people saw a human face. The issues escalated. And then when, I think Gordon Cressy pulled together a group of high-profile people with many, QCs and many, MDs, a lot of titles behind their back. behind their name. When they came together, they got attention also. So finding allies are really important. And allies can be from many different places. So, the discussion got on the agenda, both on the Police Service Board, at City Council, but also in Queen's Park. So there's a bill that was introduced. It is supposed to come into effect in March, I believe. Supposed to. The question is, can you modify behavior? Because the new change is supposed to be that it's voluntary. Well, if there's a power imbalance, can it be voluntary? Would you feel powerful enough to actually say no? Probably not. Some might, but most won't. So a lot of people in the community said, wait a second, if there's big gapping loopholes, then it's not going to work. So strategy includes the research and the analysis, but also the piece about having the emotional capacity to make change. So when we're running a campaign, it's important to locate power. So if you think about who makes these decisions, the provincial government, right? The premier. And then it's the City of Toronto, but especially through the Police Service Board. Who are the people on the Police Service Board that hires the chief? Well, there's 7 members. I think 4 of them are appointed. Well, they're all appointed, all 7 of them. 4 of them, Queen's Park, and then 3 at the City of Toronto, I think. Yeah, I think that's correct. So tomorrow, if we have a Police Service Board with 7 people, 7 board members that believe carding must end, and that we would have a chief, a police chief, that will end carding, that's when you will see action. Okay? Because who is the employer of the police chief? The Police Service Board. Who appoints people on the Police Service Board? The provincial and the city government. So finding out and tracing who has the power to make the difference is often really important when we are dealing with justice, social justice issue, locating it. And then you may then ask the question, the little old me, how am I ever going to find, how am I going to persuade City Hall or Queen's Park, yes, to have good policy, but make sure that you have good people to implement the policy. Having good policies on the book looks great, but doesn't amount to a whole lot if the people that are implementing the policy are not going to do a whole lot about it, right? So you need to make sure that the people that are actually implementing the policy believes in it and actually will do the right thing. How are we going to do that? That's the question that you need to bring your friends together and say, how do we influence City Hall or Queen's Park? In my way of seeing things, power is defined by how many relationships you have with the people around you, what kind of resources do you have together, and how committed are you to make a difference. Once you are committed, very committed, opportunity arise. If you think about Rosa Parks, when she was on the bus, it was just one Rosa Parks. She was backed up by a lot of friends, but she had the courage of her vision of what justice is about. So sometimes opportunity comes up where you as an individual can make a difference. And Rosa Parks did not do that alone. The bus boycott was backed up by a whole lot of people that knew that what they had, in this case, is the fare to take the bus, that when they collectively withhold that fare to take the bus, then it impacts on the whole social movement. This is the civil rights movement that I'm talking about. I assume you know who Rosa Parks is, who refused to move on the bus, in the bus, I meant. So it really is the opportunity that arises that can call you to be the leader, to understand that you have to make a commitment, you have to take an action, may not be the most courageous, may not be the most popular, that it would take a lot of courage to do. And secondly, that you as a leader will be called on to bring people together to say that we have the resources collectively that they need. City council need these kind of things from us. What do they need that we have, that we can use that to bargain with them, that they want? That is the question you need to ask. Sometimes they might need your votes. Other times they might need your money. Other times they might need your love or whatever it might be, your support. If you see that, understand it, and can bring people together to say collectively we have what they want, and we can then now bargain with them. That's how locating power and using power is all about. And I think it's really important that in terms of the issues of carding, that we do as much as possible the kind of organizing that are needed in the community so that the community itself feel that they have the power to make the difference. Because ultimately, when there is another confrontation, they need to say, no, I don't need to give you what you want from me because there's no excuse for me to be carded by you. So that's my little contribution on how strategy can work. I want to leave you with a story to say that sometimes David wins. Sometimes Miles can win. This is the story of David and Goliath. Most of you are familiar with this story of David of Goliath. Goliath was huge, big, strong, armed, very armed. Not only was he armed, he was wearing armaments. He was wiping out everyone. David is a shepherd, was a shepherd. His tribe, his people were being oppressed. They were being wiped out. It was not just. He had nothing other than justice on his side. So, armed with justice, when his people said, who is going to stand up and meet the challenge of Goliath? Goliath said, if you can defeat me, I'll let your people go. If you don't, well, you'll be enslaved, etc. So David volunteered himself. They looked at David and said, you, a shepherd? You have no arms. So they tried to give him swords. Here, use this. It'll help you defeat Goliath. David said, I'm not sure it fits me that well. I'm not sure I know how to use the sword. I'm not going to use it. He declines. He said, well, what are you going to use to fight this this Goliath? He brought out 3 stones. He said, I'll use stones. Stones? The guy has swords. He has his armament. What do you mean you're going to use stones? Okay, I'm going to use stone. Goliath, of course, laughed. Ha, sure. And this is the thing about pride. Pride can make you really stupid. Power can also make you stupid because you're so full of yourself. You are so sure that you have the power. You get proud and you get stupid. So, you know the end of the story. The stone that David used hit Goliath and wiped him out. So what does that tell us? It tells us justice needs to be on our side. We cannot be afraid. We need to use what we have, and we need to take action and have the courage to take the action, because David sometimes wins. So in the case of carding, I have no doubt David will be there, supported by everyone, and David will win. So thank you so much for today. And I think we are open for some questions. We have some time. Do you want me to facilitate? Sure. And then ask them question. They will answer the question, I'll facilitate. Go ahead.
My name's Suviana. Hello? Okay. My name's Suviana. I'm second year political science. And based on, what you guys were saying, I find that we are taking the same route to solve a problem, right? And this route is, I find, like an old road that is rugged, conversations, as you said earlier, that are roundabout. So the same route of conversations and discussions that are quite old now to solve a problem that's being attached to a new generation, right, of, kids and youth and stuff. So I think it would be to change strategic position and to change this route to solve this problem is what I think would be ideal, instead of conversations around, I just propose, and this is an idea of a route to change the new problem. Not the same problem, just a new route, a new strategic position, would be like to maximize on where capital is coming from. Because we can have discussions, and you said, what do they want? What do we have that they want? We don't really have anything, because this is capitalism, and we focus capital. So capital is priority, right? So what if we now capitalize or put ourselves in, I don't want to say institution, not companies, but like, say, athletic organizations, joint partnerships with athletic organizations to build, instead of necessarily just asking for things to change, going a different route and saying, okay, we're not going to ask you, we're going to go into an athlete's, because there's like, the Raptors have a partner, like a mentorship program, right? And now what if we say, hey, why don't we help you in your educational platform to be better? How about you build new TCH houses? Would that be, and then that would start something. And that's a different route. Instead of going to the government, it would be like to go to the Raptors, hey, we see you have a mentorship program of training young youth. Would you like to invest and build where youth come from? Not come from, but a lot of youth are in TCH housing. Would you like to build them? Help us build them and increase your and we can increase your educational platform and such and such and such. So, I just felt through a lot of the talking, it's the same route, which is an old road. But if we take a new route and change our position, like go around, it helps, Sorry that took a little long. I just have one more note.
Who wants to respond to that? Selena or Alvin?
Well, I'm not done. I had one more little note.
Oh, not done yet.
Sorry. I said, sorry that took a little long. I just have one little more note, little. And then you also said telling stories, right? But I slightly disagree that you said to reach emotional capacity to fight these things is telling stories. I slightly disagree on telling stories only because I believe that, hold on, my notes are very dim, but telling stories should be done in a way that we have something to show for ourselves, you know? So, like, what I mean by that is a story that doesn't necessarily involve explaining things. So, like, you have pyramids. That doesn't really need explaining. It is a great, phenomenal work, you know? So, or pictographs, you know, a language that is in pictures, you know? So, what I mean by what I'm saying is
When you're
telling,
speaking, just keep the mic there.
telling a story, not by explaining, but having something to show for ourselves by building. So I believe that there's illusions of power. I mean, you could be my teacher, but that doesn't mean, like, you know that consent thing, we consent to be governed, we consent, but it's a veil that's there that we consent to, but it's not really there. I don't actually have to I'm not obliged to the government, you know? The things that I consent to be governed to, I don't actually have to. So when I say taking a new route around the government and capitalizing on companies or athletic companies, I'm saying that forget the illusion of power that I have to ask the government to do something for me, to change TCH housing. Why don't I go somewhere over here where I just propose to ask them, hey, Microsoft, there's a large amount of kids in this community over here, or in this school, in this after-school program over here, that are doing computer programming in this high school. Would you like to come and invest in these kids? And in turn, investing in these kids results in investing in the school. So that's all I'm saying, is a new route to an old, problem.
Is that it on?
Alvin or Sanena?
Yeah, there are overtures made to various companies that, and they have, is this working?
Is
And
it,
they
can you
have,
hear?
And they have responded by doing different things in certain communities and taking on different communities. The truth of the matter is, we haven't been collectively smart economically. I mean, let me be open about that. Many who could, in fact, put their money together to build a base for certain things have taken so long to achieve that level of wealth that they have become particularly concerned about hanging on to it. Let me be truthful. I'm trying to be diplomatic, but you know what I mean. It's nice not to have to worry about the rent or the mortgage. And when they get there, it isn't that they forget, it's that you spread your wings out and they become comfortable in that. Not that they don't contribute, but it takes a great deal to put faith in a base like that, where many of the community are coming together to build wealth. There is one other thing. It isn't all that free. There are many of us who have tried to start seniors' homes and put a great deal of money into those seniors' homes and done well. But it was the point of view of one of the governments that by overtaxing and critical imposition, having people supervise them, that harassment would result in many of those seniors' homes, I'm just using that as an example, falling out of business. And so you had to go to court in order to maintain them. That takes some of your money. There is always the imposition of underhanded, powerful practices which make it difficult for you to collectively progress. But it is a great idea.
Let me just, you mentioned about, let me talk, approach the one about the stories. And the point was well made that we must tell the story. sure you may say you've heard it before, but sometime when we stop telling the story, the old issue dies, because it is current as it is 50 years ago as it is now. So when we don't tell the story, it sounds like we've resolved the situation. And I know you're saying, I heard a story about, I've heard this, but tell the story. You see? And I can't emphasize it too much, because sometimes we have to be patient. In other words, you were telling a story. You were saying to us that, I have seen this movie before, I have watched this movie before, but I would challenge you and said, but you don't know what the outcome was. You heard the story. What we are talking about, commitment, that you follow that story. And sometimes the baton that you take on of a story, you're able much more have the ability to finish that. Many people in Goliath and David wouldn't take on Goliath. But that was not the first time the Goliaths of the world say, I will bring you down. And the little one said, I heard a story before, I'll take him on. And they said, I know the story, I won't take him on. I know that story before, he will just massacre you. And he said, no, I'll take it on, and I'll take my own weapon, my stone, and I'll throw it. And people say, you must be crazy. And when it happened, it fall. Commitment, that's what Zanina both are saying. David had that commitment, but he saw that. And I can tell you within all of that, Goliath said, my golly, he fell not because of the stone. He fell because of the commitment that David had. And if we have that kind of commitment, we will change. So if you think that all of us who have had a story when it stopped, when poor Miles will stop, and you take the first step to say, my mother said I shouldn't, he had that commitment to do that. But it starts. We got to tell the story itself. Now, a quick one to talk about, let's get around the government. The story is that sometime when we do a home, for instance, she said, let us build a home for poor people. Okay, may I use, and I don't want to use my dear friend situation, but I was the Minister of Housing. And Jack and yourself, we were saying that what we're going to have, we will not have people who are just in low-income living. We want a mixture of it all. Jack and his dear, wonderful, beautiful, intelligent wife moved in and said, we'll be a part of that to show that it's a diversity. The system attacked that and said, we put it in the papers that they are living off the income itself. I'm just trying to say to you, if you don't ignore the government, confront the government. You see? And if you get around them, just remember, they are powerful, like the Goliath, but nothing to say they can't take on. So that's only two comments I want to make in your stuff. But I must say to you, I admire you analyzing it, watching it through, because you have been listening to the stories, and that's great.
And you don't need the story.
Yeah.
You're an idea thinker, and that's fantastic.
because they
That's
tape it.
fantastic. But you know, the other thing is David and Goliath can be replaced. There are all kinds of Davids and Goliaths. It's like 9 people in a government taking on when a government decides not to pass part of the legislation that was on their platform. And we go to the caucus and we say, we'll put it in the press. And employment equity gets passed.
That's right.
There are all kinds of Davids.
Yeah, let me just quick one about Parliament again, too, because it's important. I have had bills to come through, and I'm a liberal, and my caucus doesn't want to giving me a basket to carry water to do this. And I decide I need to put something at the bottom of that basket. So I go across the NDP and I said, ask me that question tomorrow in the House. You know, and then the question is tough, you know, and then I'll say to my colleagues, you heard that? When I go to cabinet, you heard that? They're attacking us. Well, we should put some money. There is different ways itself to slay Goliath.
Never one route. Just be committed to it. I saw some hands here. Yeah, go ahead.
Hi, I'm Mohammed, a criminology student here at York. I just wanted to ask, I guess, all of you, what can we do? I mean, we have this, new police chief, Mike Saunders, and, he's an African Canadian, and even he supports carding. So how can we get, that message out? I mean, you would expect maybe that he would understand, the struggles of, his own community, right? And other communities out there. So what can we do as students? What can I do myself?
Do you know any friends that have been carded?
I do.
Have you talked to them, their story? Yeah?
And it really does connect with me.
It connects with you.
And I think, again, I just want to rip out the whole, I think storytelling is one of the greatest things.
Yeah. But storytelling is not just about telling stories. It's moving us to act. If you just tell your story, it just makes yourself feel good, not good enough. So it needs to, okay, once your friend, then maybe you can have their story told, but then it needs to connect to something that needs to then lead to an action. Okay? So your question is, what kind of action can we take, right? I think you may have to find it yourself, but maybe Alvin and Sanena has some suggestion.
Well, there are many complexions. There are Caucasians, there's blacks, there's browns, and there's blue.
The policemen
Policemen are blue. And just because he happens to come from the same race as many of the people who are carded and who are complaining is an assumption that we can't afford to make. And so as far as we're concerned, the collective criticism of what's being done, you notice I haven't talked about who's doing it. He's just, a part of the system. About what's being done is where you go, and why it's wrong, and why it's against our rights and freedoms, and people supporting one another in taking it to court and to the Ontario Human Rights Commission and pushing in this way. And forget about the fact that he's black. Sometimes I think he has, but then that's just my opinion. So we can't assume that because he's black or he's white, he's going to be with us. I mean, policemen, I always assume they're blue. And if they prove me wrong, I accept it.
Alvin?
Let me just comment quickly on that. It's a beautiful illustration, actually, a reality. Don't lose sight of the objective. If they had put a Chinese, Indian, or what have you, it's nothing to do with carding. I mean, to talk about the administrative part of it, the issue itself. And this is a great test for us, because that itself, that could be the resolution itself. And look at it too, the other deputy chief had made comment. So quickly they dispensed to that one and said, but the fact is, you don't lose sight of it regardless of the color. It's almost do in religion today, where they talk about Muslims and what have you. Never lose sight of the issue itself. The issue of carding is there. Whether it's carried by black, a Jew, a blue, a green, is the issue of carding. And that is one to keep no, I better not say it. I was going to talk about Francis Fanon, but I won't say anything more about him.
There's one other thing you can do, and we do this all the time. If you see someone being harassed, say nothing. Stop and look. Stop and watch.
Stop and tape.
Stop and, well, if you can tape, fine. If you can take a picture, even better. But stop and watch. You'd be surprised how people modify their behavior when they know that they are deliberately being observed. You say nothing, you don't question, you just stop and watch. And they immediately alter their behavior most of the time.
Also, there are existing organizations. Black Lives Matter, for example, is a coalition. There are many coalitions. The Urban Alliance on Race Relations, the African Legal Clinic team. There are different organizations out there that are working on this issue. You can start on, there might even be a chapter of it here in York University that you can then join and help out. Thanks for your question. Any other questions? Okay, I'm going to take just those questions. I'm going to take them all. Like, we have what? How much time? Another 5 minutes or so? 5 minutes? So let me hear the questions, and then we'll answer all of them together.
Hi there. Oh, it's too loud. My name is Ish. I'm a first-year political science student here at York. I'm sure the influence of racism has gone down in Toronto over the past 50 years, no? Yes? No? No, it hasn't? So it's maintained? I wanted to know, I guess I'm aside from the issue. I wanted to know in what ways can we use social justice to help those who are a little bit further than us? And what I mean by that is that, when we look in Northern Ontario, we have Aboriginals who are experiencing racism in northern cities, right? You might have heard recently in the Star, Mayor Thomas Keith, I think, Mayor of Thunder Bay, was talking about how racism is really, really big towards Aboriginal people in the north, right? I wanted to know what policies, what legislation, what strategies that we've used here in Toronto that we can apply up in the north, in Thunder Bay, in places like Kenora, where closer to reserves. Yeah, that's my question.
Can you pass the mic?
Sure.
Hi, my name is Suzanne Tinglin. I'm actually part-time faculty here at York in nursing. And it's just more or less a comment. This carding, I think it's going to be consistent. It's not going to end. There is no cut and dry solution to it. I think it's about mobilizing, getting people of power to rethink the way they deal with certain situations and bringing it, as Dr. Curling had said, bring it to the press. That's the only way it's going to get heard. That's the way things are going to change. That's my feeling anyways.
Hi there. Thank you so much to the panelists who came in. I think we've learned a lot from all of your presentations. I myself could relate to a lot of them, although we could have a lot of differences. But coming from a Muslim Canadian background, the recent issues of social inequality and perpetuations of specific images have really impacted me at a personal level. Like Dr. Curling said in the beginning, that social justice is so broad and there's so many different aspects of it. But I think at the root of it, what I would say is that educational institutions have a major role in how we can address even, or to begin to solve, but just to address issues of social inequality. And my question would be that, what do you think are the possible ways that we can start bringing in change through the through the educational systems? And this could be at elementary school, high school, university level, whatever it is, because I think educational systems are very key in terms of how it's the role that schools have basically is the sociocultural integration and even the economic mobility of all individuals at the same level. So I think there should be a lot more focus at the education, at the school level in bringing change. And I was wondering what you think, how could be some of the ways that we can bring in change?
Good afternoon. I'd like to thank the masters of the college and the presenters that did make it out because the weather was quite challenging in testing. I often come to these talks at McLaughlin. I'm not a current student, but definitely think I'll be a lifelong student at York so long as these conferences happen. And I recognize that from all the attendance that I've come to these kind of events, that this panel has a peculiar flow that I thought was unlike any other, and that it really painted a full picture, and each speaker almost complimented the speaker before themselves. And then I felt a little disappointed that we had the challenge of the weather today and thought that if there was better weather, we would have a better audience. And I was hoping I could urge to the master of the college that potentially we could have these individuals come out again and present to a larger crowd, because the story that I heard today was beautiful. And the thing about stories is no matter how much times you hear a story, based on that old rugged road like you alluded to, the story seems to change, and then you start hearing different parts of that story stand out more and more and more until the story almost becomes complete. And I think a part of getting that is the commitment you have to listening to the story. I'd also like to acknowledge Dr. Bell's presence in the audience, and I don't have a question, but hopefully my question is to the master, if you are willing to perhaps have these people come out again and speak to perhaps a larger audience, because I think it was a beautiful presentation. Thank you.
Application to the north, you know, to indigenous people, how that we need to bring the issues to the press, and that there's solidarity from Muslim community, for example, on discrimination, and the question there is, what is the possible way through the education system that we can make social change on social justice?
Well, one of the things your question was premised on is that you're sure that we have seen changes in racism through the years. And yeah, it has become more sophisticated just as we have. It's still there. It just, we're one of the most sophisticated racist countries I've ever been in. As we become more knowledgeable and able to deal with this situation, it finds a new way to demonstrate itself, and then we have to change in our response to it. What happens what could happen in the North, I think the thing I find so time-wasting is that when we identify racism, when we identify any fault, it takes so long before you can get those responsible for affecting change to address it. You know, there's a saying within our community that nothing ever happens until we hit the street. It seems that way, that things happen quickly in riotous situations, and yet we're all quite sophisticated. We shouldn't have to have those occasions. But anger, for example, in 1992 when we had the riots, it started out as a peaceful demonstration. But the anger of those opposing it and pushing it resulted in a riot. Things that we were trying to get on the table for ages before that immediately were brought to the fore. So it tells people messages. It says nothing ever happens till we hit the street. The other thing, I've forgotten, you were saying education is the way to make change. We haven't got time. You know, the stories are necessary because people personalize the stories. I told you about my being at our reunion, and when I said, you're talking about blacks like that, would you look at me? What am I? And they said, oh yeah. Oh, but not you, Zenaida. Oh, but not you, you see? So people tend to, you know, see their friends as specific. And they don't generalize those attitudes. We haven't got time to wait for education alone to do it. I think it's important. One of the things we have to do is tell the truth about our history. You know, I mean, my father, who was an educator from Barbados, said for years, you know, if we ever wrote the truth about our history, we'd all take a step back and look at each other differently. But we don't. We don't. You know, racism continues not because people are ignorant, but because people love power. You know, that's it. It's the maintenance of power, and that's what we have to go after.
Let me just quickly, the only way I can actually respond to you quickly is through a story. I was in Thunder Bay, I think in North Bay. I always get confused when they go there. I always ask my staff, am I in North Bay or Thunder Bay? But we were in the north, and there was some Aboriginal woman who came before us when we were doing the roots of youth violence. And she said this to us. She said, I have lost my status on the reserve. And I said, why? She said, I had to come off the reserve because my daughter, to advance my daughter's career. She's going to school, and you may identify with that. She went to school inside the city. And because of the lack of protection and the racism and what's happening there, most of the young ladies who leave the reserve to go out there are either raped or abused or pulled off into some other things. So she herself left the reserve, lost all her status and money just to protect herself. So as you said, racism is so rampant and deep itself. Even when you personally take on, as a mother which was rather bold to give up herself for, give up most of her resources to do that, you know. And so she herself had to do that. So therefore, when we talk about racism, this is how deep it is. We have to almost fix a bit of society to protect those, even who comes out itself. And we had that story, and it's also placed in our thing there. So that is the fact that I said, yes, it is rampant and it's terrible and it's deprived a lot of people itself. In regards to, just for time's sake, in regards to education, the environments, many times that when we started a basic thing, and Zanina can recall on this, and Olivia recalled too, when we started the Breakfast Club, it was rejected and pushed back, not in our society. What do you want Breakfast Club in the schools about? Because we have a great society that's rich and we all have as a, you know, we are not a developing country, you know. Then the statistics or the studies have shown the kids are sleeping in school, the kids are hungry in school, not because of that, because of how the system has been placed. Even although the education, which of course, as Anina pointed about, get the right thing, get the right history, get the right thing going, they were not even able to keep awake because the fact is that their mom and dad was out of the house at 5 o'clock or 6 o'clock in the morning. Kids were coming to school without breakfast and they weren't learning anything. So in evening education itself, surrounding the infrastructure around that has got to be in place, because the injustice that is done, or the just system of people who have to work and leave Scarborough to go down to Olivia's place down in downtown Toronto, takes them 2 hours. Working 8 hours, taking 2 hours, so 8 and 4, 12 hours. Getting home, and then the system said, you have neglected your child itself. And the child is not even able to even have food. Not because food wasn't there, because there's no monitoring. Education is extremely important, but let us make sure that around it has that supportive device in which to make it deliver.
Mm-hmm. Those of you that said that think there is a dramatic decrease in racism, think about it. Is there a dramatic decrease of the number, of the percentage of Black or Aboriginal people that are in jail in terms of the general population? Ask yourself, is there a dramatic decrease? No. Is there a dramatic decrease on the number or percentage of racialized community living in poverty? No, because that is the color of poverty. So yes, sometimes some things are subtle, but let us also call and look at the deeply rooted racial inequality that we have in this society. Bringing attention to media is, yes, very important, but it's not enough. We do need to educate, we need to take power, we need to learn how to organize. And once we can organize, then we can actually seize power more. I think we are out of time right now. So thank you for giving all of us so much attention, and enjoy the rest of the afternoon.
At the risk of keeping you even longer, I'm going to take a 1-minute summary of some of the message of today. The effects of social injustice are felt by individuals, whether it's your grandson or any other individual. The causes of social injustice are societal and systemic, but change to bring about greater justice is slow, it's difficult, but it is possible. And change can only be brought about by individuals, especially individuals together. Our speakers today have been remarkable individuals who each have made and continue to make a difference in the movement towards social justice. It's a movement that will never be over. We will never achieve perfect justice, but we can achieve more. And it's thanks to people like our speakers today, and I hope thanks to people like those of you in the audience, that we will see change and we will see a difference. In appreciation, I'd like to give to each of our speakers what has become one of the most coveted items at York University. It cannot be bought. It can only be received in appreciation for giving a talk here at McLaughlin College. And so to each one of you, thank you very much, and I hope we'll see you again.